The moment you stop feeding a narcissist's ego, something changes inside them. Not because they suddenly realize how much they love you. Not because they finally understand the pain they caused. Something far more disturbing happens. They begin to lose the version of themselves that existed through your reactions. Every argument you defended yourself in, every accusation you tried to correct, every moment you begged them to understand you, every time you became angry, jealous, afraid, or desperate, you were giving them something they desperately needed, proof that they still had psychological influence over you. But then one day, you stop. You stop explaining. You stop defending yourself. You stop chasing clarity from someone who survives by keeping you confused. And suddenly, the person who seemed completely in control begins behaving differently. Carl Jung understood why. Jung believed that human beings construct a social identity he called the persona, a mask presented to the outside world. But behind that mask exists everything the conscious personality refuses to acknowledge. The shadow. For a narcissistic personality, that mask can become extraordinarily important because admiration, attention, obedience, and emotional reactions help reinforce the identity they want to believe about themselves. Your attention becomes a mirror. Your fear tells them they are powerful. Your anger tells them they can still reach you. Your explanations tell them their judgment still matters. Even your hatred can become evidence that they still occupy space inside your mind. This is why indifference can affect them differently than confrontation. When you fight them, they still have a role in your emotional world. When you stop feeding the dynamic, the mirror begins to disappear. And what happens next is where things become psychologically fascinating. Because the narcissist may not simply walk away. They may provoke you, suddenly become affectionate, create conflict, disappear, return, or test boundaries you thought were already settled. From the outside, these behaviors can look contradictory. But underneath them may be the same desperate question. Can I still make you react? And when the answer begins to become no, you are no longer simply rejecting the narcissist. You are threatening the psychological system that allowed them to feel powerful in the first place. For a long time, you may have believed the narcissist wanted your love. But love was never the only thing holding the dynamic together. Your attention mattered. Your approval mattered. Your emotional reactions mattered. Even your attempts to prove yourself mattered, because every response confirmed that they could still influence what you felt, what you thought, and how you behaved. This is why withdrawing from the cycle can feel so different from simply ending a relationship. You are not just removing your presence, you are removing the emotional mirror they became accustomed to using. Jung's concept of the persona helps us understand this. The persona is the identity we present to the world. The version of ourselves we want others to recognize. In a healthy person, that mask can bend. It can be questioned. It can evolve. But when someone becomes deeply dependent on external validation, the distance between the persona and the hidden self can become enormous. They need other people to keep confirming the image. Powerful, desirable, superior, untouchable, always right. And this is where your role becomes more important than you may realize. When you admired them, you reflected importance. When you feared losing them, you reflected desirability. When you defended yourself against their accusations, you reflected authority. When you kept returning after being hurt, you reflected power. None of this means you consciously chose that role. It means the relationship gradually trained you to participate in a psychological pattern where their behavior produced your reaction, and your reaction reinforced their sense of control. Then you change. You stop reacting to the provocation. You no longer spend hours explaining what they already understood. You stop trying to convince them that your feelings are legitimate. You stop checking whether they are angry. You stop measuring your worth through their approval. And suddenly the old pattern produces nothing. Imagine pressing a button that has produced the same response hundreds of times and discovering that one day the button no longer works. What happens next? You press harder. You press repeatedly. You test whether the mechanism is truly broken. Something similar can happen when a narcissistic person realizes their familiar methods are no longer producing the emotional response they expected. The provocation may become stronger. The silence may become colder. The affection may suddenly return. They may behave as if they have changed completely. But before you interpret any of this as transformation, ask one question: did they actually change? Or are they testing whether the mirror still works? Because the most revealing moment is not when the narcissist has your attention. It is when they realize they can no longer control where your attention goes. The narcissist does not necessarily panic when you leave. The deeper disturbance can begin when they realize that leaving no longer gives them power over you. There's a difference. If they disappear and you chase them, the connection remains alive. If they punish you with silence and you beg for answers, the mechanism still works. If they provoke jealousy and you react, they still occupy the center of your emotional world. But when the same strategies produce nothing, the dynamic changes completely. This is often when you begin seeing behavior that seems confusing or contradictory. They may suddenly contact you after weeks of silence. They may become unusually kind. They may mention memories you once shared, appear vulnerable, apologize without taking real responsibility, or create an artificial crisis that gives you a reason to respond. If affection fails, irritation may follow. If irritation fails, they may disappear again. What looks like emotional chaos can sometimes be understood as repeated attempts to discover which version of themselves still has access to you. Carl Jung wrote extensively about what happens when parts of ourselves remain unconscious. What we refuse to recognize internally does not simply disappear, it can influence behavior from beneath conscious awareness. This is where the shadow becomes important. A person who desperately needs to see themselves as powerful may have enormous difficulty confronting feelings of weakness. Someone who needs to appear superior may be unable to tolerate the possibility of being ordinary. Someone who depends on control may experience your independence as something much larger than disagreement. Your emotional detachment can force them closer to feelings their persona was designed to keep hidden. That does not mean they consciously think, "My shadow is being exposed." Psychology rarely works that neatly. Instead, they may experience irritation, restlessness, contempt, humiliation, or an intense desire to regain control without understanding what is driving it. And this is where many people make a dangerous mistake. They interpret renewed attention as renewed love. They think they finally realized what they lost. Sometimes what has actually changed is much simpler. The narcissist has realized that their influence is disappearing. Your silence created uncertainty. Your boundaries removed access. Your independence demonstrated that your emotional life can continue without their permission. So they test the door again. Not every return means manipulation, and not every narcissistic person behaves identically. But if someone repeatedly returns only when you become distant, watch the pattern instead of the words. Genuine change requires accountability, consistency, and respect for your boundaries even when those boundaries frustrate them. A test of control requires only one thing: getting you to react again. Because once you understand that distinction, their return stops being the proof that you matter. The real proof of your transformation is that you no longer need their return to know that you do. When the narcissist realizes the old buttons no longer work, they may not immediately surrender. They may press harder. The silence becomes longer, the provocation becomes sharper, the jealousy becomes more obvious. Or suddenly, without warning, the cruelty disappears and the person you once fell for seems to return. The warmth, the attention, the vulnerability, the promises. Everything you spent months begging to receive can appear almost overnight. And this is precisely where you must pay attention, not to what they say, but to what happens when you refuse to give them the reaction they expect. Because if the affection disappears the moment you maintain your boundaries, it may never have been about repairing the relationship. It may have been about restoring access. Carl Jung understood how fiercely the psyche can defend an identity it is not ready to question. When the persona begins to crack, the shadow does not politely remain hidden. The qualities a person refuses to recognize in themselves can emerge through projection, blame, contempt, and conflict. The narcissist who cannot tolerate feeling powerless may accuse you of trying to control them. The person terrified of rejection may suddenly reject you first. The person desperate for validation may pretend they never needed you at all. And this is where your calm becomes dangerous to the old dynamic. You are no longer providing the emotional evidence that tells them they still matter in the same way. They can insult you and you don't defend yourself. They can disappear and you don't chase. They can return with affection and you don't immediately surrender your boundaries. Every failed attempt reveals the same reality. The emotional supply they once received from your reactions is disappearing. And if you're recognizing this pattern in your own experience, subscribe to the Inner Shadow. Leave a like if this analysis is helping you see the dynamic more clearly, and share it with someone who may still be confusing manipulation with love. Because what happens next is the part almost nobody expects. When the narcissist finally understands that stronger manipulation will not bring the old version of you back, they face a choice: confront what is happening inside themselves, or find another way to escape it. When your reaction disappears, The narcissist faces a problem they cannot solve by simply trying harder. They can change the tactic, change the story, even change the person standing beside them, but they cannot force you to become the version of yourself that once responded automatically. This is where the dynamic can become brutally clear. They may suddenly appear completely indifferent. They may display a new relationship, new friends, new success, or a life that seems almost deliberately designed for you to notice. They may tell others that you are unstable, obsessed, difficult, or impossible to satisfy. And from the outside, it can look as if they moved on without feeling anything. But appearances are not the point. The real question is why your attention still needs to be captured at all. If someone is genuinely finished with you, they do not need to keep proving how finished they are. Carl Jung's idea, the shadow, gives us another way to understand this contradiction. The more desperately someone rejects an unwanted feeling within themselves, the more likely they may be to project it somewhere else. Powerlessness becomes your weakness. Insecurity becomes your jealousy. Their need for validation becomes your supposed obsession. The story gets reversed because accepting the original feeling would threaten the persona they are protecting. But you no longer have to carry what they refuse to confront. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. You don't have to expose them to everyone. You don't have to watch their life waiting for evidence that they are suffering. Because the moment you start needing their collapse, their regret, or their failure to validate your healing, they still control part of your attention. Real freedom is colder than revenge. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need an apology. It doesn't need the narcissist to finally understand what they lost. You simply remove yourself from the psychological economy that kept the cycle alive. No more admiration. No more fear, no more arguments, no more desperate explanations, no more emotional payment. And once there is nothing left to extract from your reactions, the narcissist is confronted with a reality they cannot negotiate with. Whatever they do next, your emotional world no longer belongs to them. And that brings us to the final stage. What happens when you stop feeding the narcissist completely and discover that the person who changes the most isn't them, it's you. And this is where the story finally stops being about the narcissist. You spent so long studying their silence, their manipulation, their jealousy, their disappearances, their returns, trying to understand what they were thinking and waiting for the moment they would finally realize what they lost. But freedom begins when that question no longer matters. Carl Jung believed that transformation requires confronting the unconscious patterns that secretly direct our lives. And perhaps the most important shadow you must confront is not theirs, but your own. The wound that made their approval feel necessary. The fear that made abandonment feel unbearable. The part of you that confused emotional intensity with love. When you begin healing that part of yourself, something changes permanently. Their silence becomes just silence. Their new relationship becomes none of your business. Their accusations no longer require a defense. Their return no longer feels like destiny. And their rejection no longer determines your worth. This is what they could never control, the moment you became conscious of the pattern. Because manipulation depends on predictability. It depends on knowing which wound to touch, which fear to activate, which promise will make you return. But once you recognize the mechanism, the old buttons stop working. You don't need to punish them, you don't need to expose them, you don't need to watch them collapse. You simply stop feeding the system that kept both of you trapped inside the same cycle. And that is the final irony. You began this journey wondering what happens when you stop feeding a narcissist's ego. But eventually you discover that the greatest transformation does not happen inside them. It happens inside you. They may search for another mirror. They may create another story. They may continue protecting the same mask for years. That is their journey. Yours is different. You walk away with something they can no longer take from you. Ownership of your own emotional world. And once you truly reclaim that, the narcissist doesn't simply lose your attention. They lose the version of you they once knew exactly how to control.